Our dough in the banneton, you can see, is starting to dome up. I think it's ready to be baked. And you can see it has a lot of little bubbles forming. When I indent it, returns slowly, just slowly. So I've got my oven set to 500. I've got my ice cubes ready, and we're ready to invert this onto the keel. It's also ready with some rice flour on it, and away we go. You can see what a nice shape this gets. It also has the circles of the banneton, and it kind of gives it a neat appearance. The question I always have is, how do I want to score it so that it looks good? So what I'm going to do this time is do some little circles coming away from the center. Now I'm not going very deep. And we're going to go ahead and poke that in the oven. And now we do the ice cubes, so it gets nicely steamed. And we have to do this quickly so we don't lose that 500 degrees in there, the initial 500 degrees. But you can see how much easier this was by taking that banneton and just going like that. If I do, and we do have a bowl over here with the tea towel with the rice flour on it, and that we can invert. Also, it's a little bit harder because we have the towel to deal with. In the banneton, you can just use rice flour in it. It also comes, I was looking to see if I have it out, I don't, liner that you can, it's got an elastic band and it just sits right down in there, and you put rice flour on that also, but it just comes out with a smooth surface. So, you can see how easy that was. We'll let this cook. Again, it's going to go 5 minutes at 500 degrees. Then we transfer to, or turn the temperature down to 450. We're going to let it cook for 10 minutes. Then we're going to rotate the bread 180 degrees in the oven and bake it an additional 10 minutes, and then it will be done. And then we'll be able to compare the two looks of the bread, how they look, and later we'll open them up and you can see what the inside crumb is like as well. The breads will probably taste pretty much the same. I know you're probably wondering, well, why aren't you cutting into that bread? It's warm, and you know, there's some butter over there on the counter or some olive oil. That would be great. Wouldn't it? Nice warm bread? Sourdough breads actually taste better if you let the breads cool down. And you can reheat it again if you want to. Pop it in the oven or pop it in the microwave for just a few seconds to warm it. But for some reason, cooling it down and then eating it, it has a better flavor. So that's what we're going to do. That one's cooling, the other one's baking, and by the time this one is done, maybe the one in the bowl will be ready to be baked. Okay, catch you later. So we got out our bread that we shaped and let rise in a banneton and scored a little differently on the top. You can see, I think the scoring came out nicely, has a nice design. The bread, compared to the free form that was allowed to spread on the cookie sheet, you can see this is the exact same recipe, same amount of starters, everything pretty much the same. And you can see this one spread, yet this one was able to go up. It will be interesting when we cook the bread or bake the bread from the bowl, because this is a little bit different size bowl than I've used before. It's a little bit bigger than the banneton, so we don't quite get the doming. But it'll be interesting to see what happens when we bake them. But just for comparison, you can see how the banneton kept the shape. The free form was allowed to spread. Probably the breads will taste exactly the same and they'll still be good. So that's all we really care about. But sometimes having a nice loaf of bread that has a nice shape is important too. So this is going to be a little bit trickier because we've put the dough in, and I would have liked to have seen a little more rise in the middle when I'm proofing, but I've got a lot of bubbles forming, and when I poke it, it rises back very slowly. I had a little bit when I shaped it. This is where I was telling you sometimes shaping can be a little more difficult. This pinched up, and when I pinched it, I didn't really like the shape, but that's going on the underside, so we're still okay. Anyway, this will be the trickier part, like I said, because we're going to hold all the towel back, and we're going to flip. Same thing, just as we did on this one. Now, the question is, again, what kind of, I'm just going to brush off a little bit of that excess rice flour. Okay, maybe we'll just do a big star in the middle this time. There. And into the oven it goes. Again, we're going to put in our ice cubes. Put the door closed quickly. And let's see if this one rises as much as this one did. Okay, so again, it's going to bake at 500 degrees for 5 minutes. We're going to turn the temperature down to 450, cook it an additional 10 minutes, then rotate the bread around, bake it an additional 10 minutes at the 450 degrees. So we'll see you in just a little bit so we can do a comparison. The bread is now out of the oven, and if you remember the little star we put on the top with scoring, you can see I'm going to go ahead and dust off some of this excess flour. This is okay, don't worry about this unless you really don't like it on there. You can brush off more. Some people like when if there's a lot of rice flour left on the bread because it gives a little funny texture. Or you can just quickly brush it off. Some people don't care for too much. So we're going to go ahead and take that off really quickly here. And as you can see, the reason, let me explain too, why there is so much rice flour on this versus this versus this, was that I was using a tea towel that did not have a lot of texture to it this morning. And so the flour really wasn't sticking to it as well as I would hope, and I was worried it was going to stick to the towel when it came out. So I added a little more rice flour around the dough, around the loaf while it was proofing. So anyway, there you just get a little bit off, and it's still a nice loaf. You can see it's got the nice crust. Even the bottom where I had failed to shape properly, which would be some people would deem that a defect, it's not. You're not even going to notice that. Compared to this one, maybe I had the glass of wine first. Maybe that was it. Nice bottom, nice top. I'm going to show you the difference here. This one is from the Banneton. The Banneton is very angled shaped here. It's round. The bowl I used, however, was more straight side, flatter, so the bread had more opportunity to spread. The final loaf over here was able to spread everywhere that it wanted to go. So you can see the difference between holding it together and letting it go. There are some ways, if you want to freeform your bread, you don't want to put it in a Banneton, you don't want to do a bowl, you don't want to put it around with a towel around it to hold its shape. You can add a little more flour, incorporate a little more flour into the dough to try to make the dough a little stiffer. Sometimes I find the crumb is not as open when I've done that. So that's why if I'm going to do something freeform, I'll do a little bit smaller loaves or round rolls, and then they kind of hold their shape a little bit more. There isn't quite so much dough to spread out. But now you can see the difference between shaping your bread. So get this out of the way. These again were all cooked with the same exact recipe. My recipe for my bread is 180 grams of all-purpose flour, 320 grams bread flour, 335 grams of water, 75 grams of starter, a teaspoon and a half or 11, 12 grams of salt. And that's all it takes to make this bread. We're still going to have to let our breads cool off before we cut them open, so we'll do that in another couple of hours, but it will be interesting to see how each one looks. And I do have to say, I listen to the blogs and I read books, and everybody says the bread is going to be perfect each time. Sometimes, and I don't know why, the starter seems a little moody, and it just does what it does that day. And that's kind of the great thing about sourdoughs. You don't really have to be picky about it. You can be relaxed, you can enjoy it, just enjoy the feel, enjoy the smell, enjoy the taste. And you can relax with it. I'm not trying to make a perfect sandwich loaf. I'm not trying to do that. I just want to make some really good tasting bread. So anyway, that being said, here's a few tips. I talked to you about having the pastry brush and how easy it is to kind of clean up. The other is the scraper. And now we have all of this rice flour, and I have a smooth surface, fortunately, that I can just scrape any excess. I can scrape that, all of the rice flour, extra flour off of my peel, put it onto one surface. You know, it's real easy to think you could go to the sink and dump it, but you don't want to do that because you just don't want a whole glob of this going down your drain. So I recommend that you use your scraper, use anything that you have, try to get it in a pile, and then just dump this excess flour into the trash can. Or you can dump it outside, I guess, into the flower beds or something. Also, I have a pile of tea towels sitting over there because I've used a tea towel for each one to cover the bread, and it's got some of this on it. I wouldn't want to put those straight into the washing machine. I would take those outside and shake them a little bit first to get that excess flour off of them so that doesn't gum up the plumbing. You know, over a period of time, I think you'd get a little too much flour in your plumbing, and that wouldn't be good. So, anyway, one more quick thing before we go. I wanted to let you know about a quick Christmas idea or gift idea that you can do with your breads. I know it's only May. Don't freak. We're not trying to get ready for Christmas too soon, but I thought if you try to prepare a little bit month at a time, you gather up everything and it becomes so easy at Christmas. I found that last year many of the stores were giving away, every time you bought something, a little tiny thing, they put it in this bag, all wrapped nice in tissue, and it's this great paper bag with handles, and it's a little thicker than the gift bags that you get, or you can get gift bags like with little kitchen designs on them. You take a loaf of bread, you put it in a piece of parchment, you slip it, and you can put some extra parchment in there. Some that might stick up if you would like. Just like it were tissue, but this is just parchment paper. It holds the bread down inside as well and keeps it protected. So you're going to have something that looks like this. I go into my garden and I have rosemary everywhere. And it smells heavenly. It is wonderful to put in olive oil. You just take off some of the little rosemary leaves, set it in a bowl with some olive oil and a little bit of salt, and the bread is delicious dipped in it. All over now, everybody is selling little gift bottles of flavored olive oil. It makes a great gift to go together with your bread. Anyway, I mentioned that it's May and you're preparing for Christmas. You can get little plants of rosemary this time of year. Put it in a little pot someplace or tuck it in the back of your garden. It's evergreen. And even in Christmas you can go and pick it and it will smell wonderful. This is just 3 little pieces of sprig of rosemary. I rubber banded them there together. You take, at Christmas time I took bread. I'm not doing this very well right now, but you get the general idea. Kind of doing it upside down here, so anyway, you put this nice little bow on it. And if the bread was ever so slightly warm, by the time that you give it, now that's just not very attractive, but you have to play with it a little bit. And it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be Christmas. You can give bread as a gift, a housewarming gift, a gift when you come to dinner. Anyway, you get the idea. You fix the bow a little bit, since I'm not looking at it from the right direction. You can also tie in a little bottle of olive oil with that, or simply slip it down inside, or a bigger bottle of olive oil. If you have somebody who doesn't like the olive oil, this bread makes awesome toast. A cute little jar of jam or a little collection of jams, also in a bag with a little bow, a little ribbon after you've kind of fixed it a little bit. makes for a nice gift. I don't know. Does that look kind of funky from that side? Maybe. Anyway, you get the general idea. But it's a great gift-giving idea. You can make, when you're making your own bread, a loaf of bread, maybe you want to give the neighbor a gift or something, make an extra loaf. The other thing that you can remember about this bread is that you can bake it. Once it's cooled, stick it in a Ziploc baggie and squeeze out all the air, pop it in the freezer, and I guarantee you 3 months later, if you bring that bread out, thaw it on the counter, set your oven to 375 and throw that loaf of bread in there, for just maybe 10 minutes, it is almost like it just came out of the oven fresh. It's awesome. Anyway, we'll come back in just a little while and we will open up these breads and take a look at them. Okay, so our breads have cooled off and we have all three types here. We have our bread that kind of spread all over the cookie sheet. We have the bread in the banneton, and then we have the last bread that was shaped in a bowl with a piece of linen. So shall we see what they look like inside? I think we should. Let's start with the first one. Oh, it got a little dented from in there, so it's probably filled with a lot of air. But let's check and see what the crumb looks like. Oh my. Ah, the smell. I wish you could put your nose right there and smell. That is a wonderful smell. Now, even though the bread spread on the pan isn't going to affect the way it tastes, and actually it's a nice shape if perhaps you want to make some hors d'oeuvres and you don't want a really big poofy bread. So we're going to go ahead and put this one in the basket. And there's its crumb. It's a nice open crumb, just the way that we would like it to be. And part of that, the reason that that happens is that it's a wet dough. It's a very stretchy dough, a lot of gluten to it. And so the gas that the yeast gives off is able to expand and open up. So, should we do the banneton loaf now? I think so. You never know, because sometimes you could open it and go, oh my goodness, what happened there? Oh, see now, a completely different smell, because it is a different starter, but it's the same amount of starter. And you can see that this one is not even quite as open as the last one. So let's compare the inside. But yet this one was able to rise very well. But it's still open, just not evenly open. And that does smell heavenly too. So, let's do the last one. And this was the bowl. The one that was shaped in the bowl. And I can already feel, it feels pretty bubbly inside. And you can see all the bubbles that were forming. The towel didn't kind of hold in an even shape. It kind of allowed it to bubble out. This one is still a little not as open, quite as open. It's a little bit denser actually. So what I might say to this is that it was forming a lot of bubbles, and I might have let it proof just a little bit longer, but I was concerned because it had formed so many bubbles. But is this a bad bread? I think that's going to taste pretty good too. So even though your bread isn't every single time perfect, sometimes the ones that seem like, oh, that's not as perfect, that one's not, could be more perfect, it's still a delicious piece of bread. And so all you can do is keep trying, and each time you decide what works best for you and what you want the inside of your bread to look like. So you can play with your proofing times, your temperature times, the amount of flour. But that is still a very nice rustic bread. And it's a moister bread, not a dry bread. And I will tell you, it makes excellent toast. Okay, so there you go. You've seen what the different shapes of the breads will do. They were all proofed the same amount of time. It was all the same ingredients, although, like I said, one had a starter from a different area. That was the only difference, but I have made all of these before and had each bread, made all 3 breads, only all done in a banneton, and they came out exactly the same. So anyway, I think we still have some nice bread that we can be proud of. Nope, it doesn't want to fit in there.